I'm Sean DeLaney, and you're listening to What Got You There. What Got You There is a must-follow for entrepreneurs, creatives, high achievers, and change makers. Each week, I sit down with some of the world's most influential people and focus on the journey behind their success. We uncover the strategy, tactics, and routines that help them get there. Now it's your journey, so it's time to learn what's going to get you there.
What got you there with Sean DeLaney? What got you there with Sean DeLaney? What got you there with Sean DeLaney? What got you there with got you?
I mean, once you truly can fight, and when I say fight, it's not about fist fighting. It's like, I'm going to dig down. This is hard. I'm tired. I got a pit in my stomach, but I've taken a bad shot. He's running behind me. He's gotten me beat, but I'm going to fight. And I'm not letting this guy get this takedown here, and I'm going to extend this position. And I think when I truly bought into that philosophy, that's when I truly was able to become the best in the world.
David Taylor, widely known as the Magic Man, is one of the most decorated American wrestlers of all time. David is a world champion, U.S. champion, 2 times NCAA champion, a 4-time NCAA All-American, 4-time Big Ten champion, and he's hoping to add Olympic champion in the 2021 Olympics in Tokyo, Japan. On this episode, David goes deep on his championship mindset, what it takes to be great, and what he's learned from his great coaches.
Making change transpire. That's the mission behind the most amazing tasting protein bar brand taking the nutrition industry by storm. That brand, they're MCT Co, and they make the most delicious, keto-friendly, all-natural collagen protein bars. If you're obsessed with the quality of food going into your body like I am, then head out and pick up these amazing bars jammed with 10 grams of collagen protein. They only have 2 to 3 net carbs, no added sugar, and loaded with high-quality MCT oil for the healthy fats from coconuts. Whether you're busy running the kids around from activity to activity, a professional athlete, or just someone looking for a great-tasting convenience snack, do yourself a favor, head to mctco.com and use code WGYT for 20% off your order. David, welcome to What Got You There. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. I love diving into the mindset of some of the world's most successful. But I want to know, you're moments away from walking out onto the mat. What's going through your head when you're about to wrestle?
I think for me, it's just, I kind of just limit to a couple small things. You know, I think move my hands, move my feet. Nobody can match my pace, and nobody's put the work and the preparation that I have. And then the last thing I tell myself is to let it rip. You know, I think a lot of times when we compete or just in life, we overcomplicate it with so many what ifs or, you know, and I think in wrestling, you know, those that have wrestled, you know, so what if a guy does this, or what if I'm doing this, or, you know, a game plan or whatever it is. But, you know, ultimately the preparation that you put in leading up to that competition is going to determine your result more than anything you're doing during that time. So for me, it's keeping it simple. And if I do those things, then typically it works in my favor.
Is this one of those mindsets that you've had throughout your career, or is this as you've evolved in your career kind of adopted that?
I think it's definitely changed. I think earlier in my career, like when I was young, you know, youth level, I don't really remember exactly what I was thinking then. It was just a matter of going out and just like kicking butt, you know. I think as I got older, you know, as I had a lot of success and, you know, kind of started to have that expectation of success, you know, I think in high school was where I probably felt the most anxiety before I would wrestle, no matter who it was, you know, if it was someone that I was better than or someone that was equal to me or better than me. I definitely overthought it then, you know, felt like it then I felt more limited, you know, even in my skills and my abilities. I felt like things had to go specifically for me to do well. As I got into college, I started to, you know, my coaching staff, you know, Cael Sanderson is the greatest, not one of the greatest wrestler of all time. He is the greatest coach of all time. So, you know, our staff that we have with Cael Sanderson, Casey Cunningham, Cody Sanderson, and the assistants have changed. The other, you know, the 4th assistants changed over my career, but, you know, I've kind of taken what they've instilled in us on a daily basis, and I've applied that really to my style. And the way that I wrestle is, you know, it's gunslinger mentality. It's score. You know, I'm scoring as many points as I possibly can. I frequently give up points and I'm behind early in matches, but I'm very well conditioned. And mentally, I believe that as the match goes on, it favors me. So I think as I've gotten older, matured, and used those experiences, now, it's keeping it simple and ultimately coming back to it. You got to let it rip. If you want to score a lot of points, you're going to give up some points, and I'm okay doing that, knowing that result favors me.
So many different directions we could go right here. I want to return back to let it rip. And I want to know how you balance that line between being absolutely amped up and more of a calm, steady Zen mind like state. Are you just fully revved up, or are you more cerebral at that time?
Again, I think experience has changed that. I think I've wrestled in a lot of big matches in my career, just with the success that I've had, and then ultimately with the success that you have, the matchups, it's like, man, for me, I've always been offensive, very offensive, never on the defense. I've always been someone that scores a lot of points. So there's times when in college, my senior year, I wrestled Kyle Dake, who is known for his defense. We were both extremely successful in what we did, but we're completely opposite in the way that we wrestled. I was score 15 points every single match. He was win 3-2, but he always had the ability to win by 15. It's just kind of that decision making of, okay, I'm going to get myself tired. I'm going to wrestle through this tired phase, and I'm going to try and continue to score, or I'm good enough to not let this guy score any points. I'm going to win. And that was kind of how we wrestled. So I remember our matchup. It was the highest viewed. It has, to this day, it's the highest viewed NCAA tournament of all time. And it probably will go down as the highest viewed NCAA tournament of all time, just because of the storyline and the magnitude of that match. Going into that match, I was so amped up. Like, I visualized the first 20 seconds in my head that entire season. I'm like, man, I'm going to go out. I'm going to come out full of energy. I'm going to get this first takedown. And then I never really thought past that. So what happened is that match happened. I mean, it's like all 16,000 people in that arena are on their feet. I mean, it was so hyped up. It was the first time in NCAA tournament history that they reordered the matches. So we were the last match. So we were the 10th match, kind of like the main event UFC type deal. And, running out, I run up on the stage, I'm like so ready to go, shake hands, boom, first 10 seconds, get a takedown, go out of bounds, come back. But it was like, now what? What am I, I'll keep scoring points. But then it was like, I stopped in that, I was that kind of time we talk about maturity where I scored early, but it wasn't like, okay, this guy's a great wrestler, I'm just going to keep scoring. It was, this guy's a great wrestler, now I'm going to try and win this match. That's not the way I wrestle. And I ended up losing that match 5-4. I had more matches in the next couple of years that were like that, where I would be in big matches and wouldn't quite win, 7-6. There were matches that I just never really wrestled before. Now, as I'm, kind of fast forward to where I am now, 2018 World Championships, my very first match was the retaining world and Olympic champion. So #1 pound for pound guy in the world. Very first match, my first World Championships. And I knew that as, he wrestles a high pace and, very similar to what we talked about before, quality of opponent. But going into that match, I wanted it. I'm like, I want to be the best in the world. I want to wrestle the best guys. I know this is going to be a dogfight. I know that we're going to battle back and forth. We're going to be exhausted. But going to that match, completely different. I visualized the entire 6 minutes. I understood that this is going to go back and forth. I'm probably going to be losing. I'm going to have to dig deep in the second period, in the 4th and 5th minute, to find a way to beat this guy. Going into that, so I actually remember, warming up, going into that match, walking out to, and instead of running out to the mat, walking out. And at the time, again, this is like maybe the biggest, maybe the second, this is one of the 2 biggest matchups probably in the World Championships of all weight classes. And, walking out to the mat, I remember just kind of like raising my fist up to my fan base, just like, I'm ready to go, walk out there. And the match did not start the way I wanted. I was down 6-2 going into the break with only 3 minutes left in the match. And then I scored 11 straight points. 9 straight points and won 11-6. So it was just crazy, the evolution of 2013 mindset to 2018 mindset with just maturity and experience. So to answer your question, yeah, I want to let it rip. But I also have that calm demeanor of understanding that things are going to happen in this match. Well, you got to rely back onto those things that you focus on pre-match, as the adversity hits during your competition.
You've mentioned the evolution of those maturity levels a few times now. And I'm wondering, that maturity level, is that about experience, or can that be rapidly paced up based on great coaching or even just your own self-work?
I think it's a combination of lots of things. Ultimately, in wrestling, for those that maybe aren't familiar with it, it's not, there's a team aspect to it, but it's individual, because there's no, when you step on the mat, it's you and that other person. If you're not in good shape, you're going to get tired. You're not going to have a way to, maintain it. If that guy's better than you, you're going to struggle. If you're better than that guy, you're at an advantage. If there's no, your preparation is going to have such an impact on your performance. Whereas in other sports, man, if there's 11 people on the field and you don't have a great game, there's 10 other people that could have their best games of their lives, right? And you could still be able to move forward. In wrestling, we really have, you can train all year. You can be the, number one person in the world. You can be the greatest wrestler, but you really only have to perform in 2 tournaments, your trials and the World or Olympic Championships. Those are only 2 tournaments that mean anything. And at those tournaments, you have to be at your absolute best. You have to be the number one person in your bracket during that time to be considered the greatest. And if you're not at your best, because other people in the world are great, and if you're not at your best and you lose, that's it. Next year, you have a chance again. There's no 7, best of 7 series. There's no, no one else that can help pick you up. If you don't feel great or you're mentally not in the place that you should be, it's going to be very difficult. So I think coaching has a huge aspect on that. But for me, it's what I've found, number one, coaching, right? I think the way that I think and I wrestle the way that I do because of the environment that I'm in. And I'm a huge believer of you're a product of your environment. Nittany Lion Wrestling Club here in State College, Pennsylvania is the best Olympic regional training center in the world. I'm constantly challenged every single day, as I would be if I'm competing against the best guys in the world. So it's just it's structuring that mindset and that how I address the practice every single day. It's going to have the biggest impact on when you perform, and I think then you throw an experience of, over the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, in 2017, 2018, I competed more than anybody in the world. I was averaging probably 25 to 30 matches a year. That meant I was traveling every 6 weeks. I was going overseas, to, Azerbaijan, to Krasnoyarsk, Russia, to somewhere in Europe, to, we didn't really have too many domestic competitions, to Iran. And in doing so, I was wrestling great competition. And I think that experience really helped formulate. That was kind of that piece that I was missing. I kind of had the first 2. And once I really started to compete and get a handle on how I wanted to think and how I wanted to perform, how I wanted to make weight, recover, do all those things, then it kind of gave me that full package as I went into that 2018 World Championships.
How much do you do after a match? Are you going back, studying your technique, the opponents, all the little ins and outs, or is it you compete, it's done, you move on?
There's not enough time, in a mat, it's funny, you put so much time into preparation and practice, you train and you wrestle, so a match is 6 minutes. So it's 3 minutes, a 30-second break and 3 minutes. And it's fast. Especially the way that I wrestle, there's not a break at all. There's no lapse in motion. I'm not calculated in the way that I sit around and wait. I'm constantly getting people to react. And it's a fast-paced match. So you practice that way. When you get in a competition, you wrestle, and you're back on the mat. In the early stages of a tournament, you might have an hour, or 2 hours, kind of depending on the size of your bracket and that kind of stuff. But as you start progressing to your tougher matches, you're wrestling every 20, 30 minutes. So basically, it's and that goes into that experience factor of understanding how to push yourself to that capacity, of a real competition, and to know how to recover to be able to do that again and again and again. And it's going to take 4 to 5 matches to win a tournament of that caliber. So you come off the mat, it's okay, move, cool down, get your mind right to go back out there and battle again. It's not really much time to go back and really evaluate much of things. It's small details at that point. Your preparation's already done. So it's hey, this guy's going to do this, be aware, and it's at that point, go out and let it rip.
Yeah, you mentioned your preparation. You were talking a little while ago about visualization, and I'm wondering how much of a component do you implement that for each match, and then how long have you been doing that for?
I think I've always visualized since I was a young kid, of what I wanted to achieve. I've always wanted to be great, and I've always, been able to visualize things where it felt so real that I was getting goosebumps. And for me, it's just it's keywords. Olympic champion, boom! Right now, I get goosebumps. I've been thinking about that for 20 years. So I think when I visualize these matches, and the experiences, and I try and make them so they seem real to me, to really feel like what it feels like when I'm out there. So I don't really take time to visualize because it's so frequent in my daily routine. You know, my wife will be just looking at me and all of a sudden I'm like moving my hands and she can be like, oh, I've just lost you. You know, I've lost you to your thoughts, you know? And I think, you know, I do that so frequently throughout the day that it's become just routine for me. And I think the more you see it, then, you know, when you do it, it's just, you've seen it so many times that you've kind of seen it into fruition.
Yeah. I mean, if you truly want to be great at something, it's just got to be ingrained in you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to rewind though, because one of the things that's fascinated me most about you is just how you first became involved in wrestling and then that first season. So I'd love if you could just set the context, what that first season was like wrestling for you.
It's such a long time ago. I started wrestling when I was 5 years old. We lived in Wyoming at the time. So the Evanston Red Devil Wrestling Club was my first wrestling experience. And I was a high energy kid, you know, going into practice. And I don't really remember the specifics of practice. You know, you kind of have those like pictures I remember what the room looked like. I don't remember much outside of that. I remember, you know, crying. I remember losing matches. And I lost a lot of matches. I didn't win anything until my very last tournament. So in a wrestling, you kind of have this like peewee circuit where you have your kind of 5 or 6 local towns and you just kind of show up and you wrestle. You show up and you wrestle. You kind of categorize, you know, by your weight class. Weight classes are kind of informal at that point. It's you group people together, you know, these 6 or 8 kids or whatever it is. I didn't win anything until the last tournament and I won. I remember kind of getting the medal. And I remember turning to my dad, you know, when's the next tournament? He's like, well, you know, son, it's next year. And I remember being like, man, I can't wait to do this again. So at the end of the season, you know, there's a year-end banquet and, you know, you give your awards, your most valuable wrestler, your, you know, most committed, you get all these awards, you know, and basically I feel like I look back and I'm like, wow, well, they basically ran out of awards. So they decided that, you know, oh, this kid, you know, he was the worst wrestler, but he paid the best and it was most attentive. So, you know, I won the most attentive award and I vividly remember that trophy. I mean, we still have it. You know, my parents have most of that stuff now, but it's just like the tiny little plastic with the gold plate, you know, but that meant a lot to me at the time because then, you know, fast forward the next year, 2 years down the road, you know, did that award keep me in wrestling? I don't think so. I think I've always been extremely competitive and I want to win no matter what I'm doing. So I think, you know, maybe, you kind of get a taste of what winning felt like, you know, a little bit, but also that award kind of kept me motivated. And then that kind of kept me moving forward. But yeah, I mean, my story did not start of, man, this kid was great right away. I was horrible. Could not do what I wanted to do, but quickly because I was motivated and I wanted to do well, you know, I started to trend in that direction.
Yeah. I think that's so inspiring for so many people to realize you don't have to start off great to accomplish great things. And I would love to know, I know this was a really long time ago, but what was that like year 2, year 3? Just to be able to go from no experience, losing most of your matches, to all of a sudden really starting to excel. What do you think you did besides just having that internal motivation?
I think I had extremely committed parents, and I think that's so important. Now, you know, fast forward to my life now, I run a successful wrestling club here in Central Pennsylvania called the M2 Training Center, and you know, I think trying to use my experience over time to try and guide this generation of parents and wrestlers to success. And I think that you can, you know, parenting is I think and success are definitely linked, you know, and I think if parents are absent from that, then you have to really rely on the coach to kind of be that parent figure of getting that kid to be dedicated and buy into the bigger picture, but also having a parent that's not so overbearing that they drive the kid away, but also supportive of them, you know, so it's such a fine line. So going back to my career, I was very fortunate that my parents were very committed. So, you know, if there was practice 3 days a week, they were there. You know, looking back, my parents' schedule was never about themselves. It was constantly like, I don't ever remember a time that there was a practice and I wasn't there. And it wasn't like it was optional. It was, okay, if practice is 3-4 days a week, I was at 3 or 4 practices. And I don't ever remember like, well, we got a party that we got to go to. Like my parent, they didn't do that, you know, and that's crazy looking back now and now being a parent and understanding the commitment that, you know, our baby's 3 weeks old. So already, you know, realizing, man, it's wild how your time changes. But my parents I was 100% committed to my sister and I and our events, and everything that they did in their lives was structured around pretty much ensuring that we could be where we need to be to have the opportunity. So I think in year 2, I got better. I remember there was this kid, I'm pretty sure his name was Braxton Hamilton. And he was just like, he had the big moves. So in wrestling, like you have your technique, and at a young age, there's 3 or 4 moves. You have a headlock, you have like a mixer, it's like the home run moves, that just work at a high. If you're good at young age, if you're strong and you understand those moves, you have a ton of success. The problem is there's a time limit on those moves that eventually when everyone else kind of gets strong and learns how to wrestle, they aren't as effective anymore. And this kid had them all, right? He had the throws, he had this and that, pin you like every time we wrestled him. And I remember, it was the end of I started to get closer and closer to this kid, to the point where, the weight classes were 55 and 50, whatever they were. And I think we wrestled 55 pounds, to the point where then he was going to a different weight class. And I was like, I want to wrestle this kid. I want to beat this guy. So I remember that, I think it was Cokeville, I think was this tournament. I feel like that's what it was. And my dad was a pilot for Delta Airlines, and he would remember these details better than I would. But he had just got off his trip, and he drove straight to this tournament. And I was sick. I had the flu the night before, but I wanted to go wrestle. So my mom took me to this tournament, and I weighed in at like 50 pounds. So I wrestled 50. Well, sure enough, this kid had cut down to 50. So I wrestled him, and I beat him that day. And I remember my dad had showed up. I just kind of showed up, and I didn't even know who I was going to wrestle, what I was going to weigh. And that was one of the kind of the first, understanding of like success of that year. And I think once I beat the kid, I always beat him. Then my third year, I was starting to win everything and locally. So my parents like, okay, what's the next step? All right, it's drive places. It's, we live in Evanston, Wyoming. Let's look at a perimeter of 6 hours. Every weekend we were driving to Idaho, Utah, Colorado, and with my dad being an airline pilot at the time, prior to 9/11, it was so easy to non-rev. It was get on a flight and fly to Oklahoma, wrestle a tournament. And I get 2 brackets, 2 age divisions, wrestle 10, 12 matches, get as many exhibitions as I could, because that was my practice. I didn't really have many practice partners because, my dad would try and do as much as he possibly. He would like pre-fatigue me before practice, because if not, it wasn't competitive. So he would get me as tired as I possibly can. Then I go to practice, and you'd kind of like rotate people in on me. And like, we'd have to like basically beg people to come to practice, as my partners at the time, because so my practice, and I saw that as not competition. I saw competition as fun, as practice. So every time we go somewhere, it was, wrestle 55, 10 and under, 12 and under, wrestle, go up and wrestle 60 pounds and wrestle, whoever the best person within 10 pounds, we would exhibition that person at the end of practice, at the end of the tournament. And that was kind of my third year, but we started going to the sort of the national tournaments, and I was behind. At the time there was 3 big tournaments. And it was, there's a Cliff Keen Kickoff Classic in November, the Tulsa Nationals in January, and the Reno World Championships in April. And it was like, if you won all 3, you won this thing called the Trinity Award. And the kids at that age, if you won a Trinity Award, you were the best. If you could, it was accumulation of points over those 3 tournaments. So I remember my third year, you're kind of talking about how you go to those tournaments, and I would just step on the scale. Whatever I weighed, I wrestled. I always would bump up to people, wrestle the best guys. Well, I go to the Cliff Keen Kickoff Classic. This is the beginning of my third year. And, my dad's like, wow, Dave, if you have to make weight, you can't wrestle. I'm like, well, what do you weigh? I'm like, I don't know, 56. He's like, okay, we'll go 58. Well, 8 and under 58 pounds is like insanity at that age. I remember kids being the kid that won, I think his name was Dallas Bailey. He was carried on the scale at 8, whatever, at 10 and under, 8 and under, whatever the weight class was. And I was so outmatched, like by skill and size and everything. But I think I went 2 and 2. So, we started going to a bunch of tournaments, getting a lot of experience. I went back to Tulsa Nationals in January. I weighed 55 pounds, wrestled 55 pounds. And I was a match away from placing. I remember I lost to John Keller from Kansas in the round of 12 to not place. But I had kind of been like, okay, I'm closer now. Then the kid who won that tournament was Colin Palmer, who was probably one of the best youth wrestlers I've ever seen. Go to April, where you've wrestled a full season. I weighed 54 pounds. And I decided I wanted to go 52 pounds. And it was never my dad's choice of saying, Dave, you're going 52. I'm like, Dad, I want to go 52 pounds. I want to win this tournament. He's like, all right, well, if you're going to do it, I guess we'll do it. I go 52 and I won that tournament. And that was kind of the first big tournament that I had won. And at that point, moving forward, that kind of set the standard of, man, I can do well at these big tournaments and continue to succeed. But it kind of all came to my dad always gave me the choice of what weight I wanted to wrestle. If anything, he would step in and tell me that, no, you're going to the next weight class. If I'm like, weigh 75 and I want to go 73, he's like, no, you're going 76. You know, you're not cutting down to 73. So I think he never told me that I had to go down a weight class, which was important. And I was always just driven by the competition and wanting to be the best. And luckily my parents could kind of continue to provide those opportunities, you know, as I continue to advance.
It's so fun hearing about these stories about you bringing up kids from 20 years ago, which I have no idea if these kids went on to wrestle even in high school. And you remember these matches vividly. And I'm thinking back to my sports career. I remember the exact same thing, kids that I would just target and I wanted to come after. I'm wondering, what other mind games were you doing, or what was the narrative like in your head? You were just talking about how internally driven you were for competition. What was it like in your head?
I just remember just wanting to practice, you know, I just always wanted to practice. I always wanted to go to, well, I take that back. I didn't always love practice, but I loved to compete. And, you know, it was like, I had great teachers, you know, back in the day where, you know, they let me miss Fridays and things like that. But I was a great student. My dad's, you know, kind of only requirement was your homework needs to be done before. So I remember, like, you know, being on the airplane, putting my tray table down, doing my homework, you know, in class, always trying to be ahead, finish my homework before class was over, you know, to be able to, I'm like, okay, well, if I just do my homework and I get good grades, I can go wrestle. This is great. You know, so we go, you know, I remember it was like, I'd love the opportunity to like be in the car for a couple hours and play my Game Boy, you know, or whatever it was, and then go wrestle. And, you know, there were a lot of good wrestlers, youth wrestlers. There's always great youth wrestlers. And I was around the best. You know, there was these three brothers that were from New Mexico that were awesome. The Adamson brothers. There was so Colin Palmer I mentioned. So it's kind of like, as I started to, you know, go around these tournaments, we had this friendship, and we used to Logan Stieber. So these are some of the greatest wrestlers of all time, you know, at a youth level, at a high school level, that we kind of all grew up together. And we had this club called the Bad Boys Club, where we had these cool black singlets, gold writing, Bad Boys Club. We'd get together. So the Adamsons lived in New Mexico, and they would kind of part-time live with their mom in Utah. So I trained with Dak and Riley pretty frequently. Dak and I competed a lot in our careers. Riley and I only competed a couple times in our careers. And Colin Palmer and I competed only once, and Logan Stieber and I competed twice. So most of the time we were separated by either age or weight classes. So we would just run it up like 55, 60, 65, 70. And that was kind of the first experience for me of being on team. You know, we kind of felt like that. We'd warm up together. We'd sit with each other in the stands. You know, every dad was different. You know, my dad was definitely the most lax of all of the dads. And there were some extreme. There was a couple of dads that were extreme crazy, but you know, you're getting your products around your environment. So there were times my dad got a little bit crazy, but I mean, I look back and, you know, his was more of just the expectation of, you know, understanding like, hey, if you're going to commit to this, let's do it to the best of our abilities, you know. And anytime that he was really frustrated with me was if I was just like being a baby, if I was crying and not putting forth my best effort. That was really the only time and it was more of an accountability thing. And look back, those lessons that I learned are the reason why I'm successful now. Obviously there were some blurred lines around that time, you know, when you're just a kid and, you know, whatever there are. But I think, so kind of give you an idea, like I looked for those tournaments because it was like being around my friends, you know, and like we could go, it was like fun to, you know, at the end we'd win the team tournament, you know, and it was like, we had this great group. We get together, you know, all the dads, we get together, we'd be like, call this Headbangers Ball, where basically it was like all these crazy dads would get their best kids together and we would just beat the crap out of each other. The kids and the dads would be like, the kids would be crying every single practice, you know, and dads would take turns basically kind of taking pride on whose son was the best of the day, you know, but it was kind of crazy looking back, but you know, we all would turn around and like be really successful in the tournaments.
Man,
now, do I think that this is necessary to be successful? I don't. I don't encourage my kids to do this kind of stuff now. You know, I think there's other paths that are good, but my dad didn't know any better. You know, it was like, hey, these guys are the best guys. If we can kind of do what they're doing, then we'll be successful. Well, it turns out they all burn out. I'm the only one that continued. It's the only wrestling still to this day. You know, most of those kids didn't even make it to college. So, you know, it didn't work. It worked at that youth level, but it didn't work long term. You know, only 2 of us made it to the college level. And 2 of us ended up being great, but those other kids that were better than us at that age. So Logan Stieber and I both became 4-time state champions, multiple-time national champions, and world champions out of that group. But the other guys didn't even wrestle in college. You know, they were so either burnt out or injured by the time they got through high school that they couldn't even really compete anymore. So you kind of look back and put it in perspective. But to answer your question, like what did I think about it? It was just fun for me. It was, let's go be around my friends, be around my teammates. Let's win these tournaments. And that was the way I looked at it.
I absolutely love hearing these stories, just so you know. This is really cool for me. But you mentioned in year 3 when you started to have some success. When did you realize that you were capable of truly being great in this sport and not just winning some youth tournaments?
So I would, the years, I'm trying to think exactly. So my 3rd year, I was, I'd gone to where, I was the best in my little area. And I was like a guy that would go to those big tournaments. And the guys that I remember wrestling like consistently, we were like kind of same age, same weight. Be a kid from Florida named Eric Rojales, Dak Adamson. Those are the kind of the 2 guys I remember. We had a lot of rivalry. We went back and forth in our careers. And we would beat most of the other kids. There were a couple other kids that were good, but I would kind of go at that point. I'd be, a top 4 guy. I'd win some of the tournaments. I might lose to one of those guys, or we'd all kind of take turns winning. I would say by my 4th, I'm trying to think my age, but by the time when I was 12 and under, I think, 11 and under, I made this jump from, winning these tournaments to dominating everybody, where I would go and do 5 matches and I would tech fall all 5 guys, and that's 15 points, and some guys in the first or second period. So I'd made a really big jump. And I remember it was kind of the reason I changed the way that I wrestled was based on the most outstanding wrestler award. And it was given to the person that had the most pins in the least amount of time. So, early in my career, that kind of 3rd, 4th time, everyone want to win, but now you want to be the most outstanding wrestler in your age division. So that's across all 10 and under weight classes. Whoever has the most pins in the most amount of time, or 12 and under, whatever the age group is, you win the outstanding wrestler. So now you're the best and you're the most dominant. And that's where the competition side kind of came in. So yeah, I won a couple of those awards pinning guys, but I kind of got this path where I wasn't pinning guys. I was getting frustrated and I wasn't wrestling very well. And my dad saw that trend and he's like, nope, we're done with that. You're not allowed to go out and try and pin this dude in the first period. Let's go out and get 5 different takedowns. And then we'll get 3 different turns. And I got motivated by doing that. And it was so much easier for me to score 15 points in a match than it was to try and pin somebody. And I started winning those awards way more frequently because it was really hard for someone to get 5 pins in a tournament, or even 3 pins in a tournament. But I could get 5 tech falls, which counted as a pin, And I started winning those outstanding wrestlers almost every tournament I went to, by truly being the most dominant wrestler. I would literally, in a 5-match period, I would score 70, 80 points. And that's when I really kind of take that next step. I had a lot of technique. I was just like, step out there. I was the best, and that was the way I thought. And I think that's when, it's kind of like, wow, okay. I was so kind of caught up that I didn't, I always thought about being a national champion. I always had those goals, but I don't really remember looking forward too much. It was just, for me, it was like, okay, let's go to the next tournament and I want to be the best. And then it was just, as I went up in age groups, it was a different type of competition and level of expectation.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear you talk about the games inside of the game that you're playing once you reach that elite level status. And you mentioned just even thinking about being a national champion. Why'd you end up choosing Penn State?
So, growing up, I think the biggest impact that was on my career was definitely Cale Sanderson. You ended up being my coach at Penn State. At that point, when I was 8 years old, he was going through his competitive career at Iowa State, and that's why I wrestled the way I did. I remember watching, because when I would go work out, and I'd lift or do my exercise or whatever it is, all I wanted to watch was either highlight videos of wrestling moves, whatever it was, or I wanted to watch the replay of the NCAA wrestling finals. And I remember it's like, okay, you watch and it's like, this guy wins 5-3. This guy wins 3-2. This guy wins in double overtime. And then it was Cale just dominating people as a freshman, scoring 20 points. And then it's like, wow, I want to be like this guy. This guy is just dominant. And I informally knew Cale at the time. So when I started to be good by my 2nd, 3rd year, we started driving. My parents would have to drive, to get partners. And we started driving to Wasatch, Utah. And that's where Steve Sanderson, Kale's dad, was the head coach of. That's where the boys, all the Sanderson boys all wrestled at Wasatch. So when they would come, Steve was one of my first coaches. And when those boys would, Kale and Cody and Cole would come back from Iowa State, they would wrestle on the holidays, and I remember kind of being around them and seeing them and, rolling around with them and stuff at the time. And that meant so much to me. But then I remember I felt like I knew Kale. Like I know him, and I watched him wrestle. And I remember going to tournaments and going up and try, he'd be signing autographs at Tulsa Nationals. And I would take all my buddies up there and I'd go up like, I don't think Kale probably even remembered me, but I would act, he would, oh yeah, Dave, how you doing? And I would be so cool because I could take my friends up to talk to Kale, but that was the impact that he had on me. So that's why I was always thought in my head, I'm like, I want to, I hope that, he achieves his goals. I want to achieve my goals like him. And I hope that he coaches somewhere and I want him to be my coach. So he was the coach at Iowa State at the time. He kind of took over head coaching job for his alma mater. And I chose to wrestle there as a junior in high school. So I just kind of never really opened up the recruiting process. I was getting contacted by every coach in the country, but I kind of shut it down pretty quickly. And I was like, I just want to go wrestle for Kale as a junior. And I remember I was only 112 pounds. And, the minimum wrestling weight in college is 125. And I was, always, thought of as, the next level. But the biggest, I'd say, when I was in high school that people critique was I was, my success was at 103, 103, and 112 by my junior year. So people were like, I don't know if this kid's even going to be big enough to wrestle at 125. Well, the people that really, I remember Ohio State thought I'd be 141. I remember John Smith at Oklahoma State thought I'd be 149. I remember Kale telling me I was going to be big, 157, 165, because they looked at my dad. My dad was 6 feet tall, 200 pounds. But I remember a lot of coaches recruiting for 125. They'd be like, oh, I think you're a 125 pounder. So I went as 112 pounds. I committed to Iowa State with the, he believing that I was going to be bigger, in my career. And, that next year, after my junior year, I grew to 135 pounds my senior year in high school. And then after my senior year, I had all planned on going to Iowa State, and Kale really shook wrestling up and took the job at Penn State. And I remember instantly the only reason I was going to Iowa State was because of Kale. And, the whole coaching staff, Cody and Casey, went to Penn State, and I was just, okay, well, I remember in my head be willing to just, if I was going to miss a year of eligibility, I was willing to do that to go there. But I was able to get a release from my scholarship, and then I followed Kale to Penn State, and I went there.
During your time at Penn State, what's it like getting to compete for the greatest of all time? I just want to know what it's like having a coach at that level. What do you take away from him?
I mean, it's such a, there was times, Kale has always been to me like a big brother, cause he's the youngest of, Kale, Cody, and Casey. He's the youngest. So when I was younger, it was like playing, we'd go over, we play video games, and it's like, we had the same, I'm like, man, he's so cool. We have the same thing. We both like playing Star Wars Battlefront, and so we've always had that relationship. And I think it's always been, coach and big brother. Whereas, Casey and Cody have, kind of always been, I'd say until now at this point in my career, coach first, kind of like maybe like friend second, if that makes sense. So, so with Kale, I would say just the experience of all three of those, I've had different times of my relationship has kind of gone all three of them, I've leaned on them different ways for different expertise. And I think I got really close with Cody in college because I was, he went through with what Kale went through with the expectation, the way that he wrestled, and when I was having troubles with, maybe it was the expectation, because it was like, for me, my entire life, it's never been, I've always, since I was good, it was always, man, this kid could be great, but man, he can't be great because he's too small, or, he's not strong enough, or, it was like, they could always find ways to say that I wasn't good enough, so it was like always kind of figure out that way. And then it was like, but the expectation was always to win and dominate. So it's like, if I won by 5 points, like, he's declining. He's not as good as he used to be, it's great. But it's like, if I got to the point in college where it's like, if I didn't win by so a major decision in wrestling is 8 points. So if I didn't win by 8 points, people would be like, they would think something was wrong with me. And I was like getting worse, so it was, it was like kids' expectation of I wanted to be the best and I wanted to dominate people, but everyone's expectation for me was also to dominate people. And that was, I think, I'd say Kale and I are probably the only two people maybe ever that have had that type of expectation around us. And it wasn't like we would dominate with like one move. It's not like we would get, okay, we had a great tilt and all we did, if we got one takedown, we could tilt and beat everybody. It was the way that we could wrestle and score from every position. And I think that's where we're most comparable in that way, in expectation and also in ability. So Cody, I could lean on a lot with, man, I'm really, how could you help with him here? Or like, what was this? So I got really close with him. And then with Kale was always just, it was a technical side and going out and when we wrestled and I just, him being in my corner and his expertise and just aura of what he's meant to me in my career has been so impactful. And then as I've gotten older, I've developed, at this point, really, I guess, if you could say my personal coach is Casey Cunningham. And I think because when I was in college, being 157, 165 pounder, Casey Cunningham was the middleweight coach. And as I got better, he was the guy that really, I think, has made me become who I am now from a mental toughness standpoint, because I was always talented, but I think it was a time in my career, and it's hard to say this, when things got hard, if I was in a close match, it was hard for me to be able to, I guess, process how to win those close matches because I was always dominated people. And Casey was the one that really got me to learn how to like truly fight in wrestling, of understanding the importance of these positional battles. And because he was just stronger than me. He was way more experienced than me. He was my coach. And he just knew how to really challenge me to the next level. And I think I've really grown as a wrestler with him over the last 4 or 5 years. And he travels with me all over the world. If we go to any tournament that we go to, he's with me, and I think, and now he's become, my coach and my really good friend. So I have a really great relationship with all three of them, but different points in my career. I'd say Kale the earliest, then Cody, and then Casey have all had such a huge impact on me at different times and in different ways.
You mentioned the impact Casey's had on the mental toughness. Do you have any examples in terms of how he's gotten that out of you?
I mean, I just, I was a really talented kid, in terms of wrestling skill, and stuff, but I was never strong ever in my entire life. I was always pretty weak, actually. I remember always taking pride in, no, I'm wrestling strong, and I had leverage and I knew how to use my body, and how to do things. But when it came to pure strength of, grabbing a leg, pulling it in, I never had that. Casey is the strongest human being in the world. Like I remember like in times where I'd be on a single leg and he would sprawl. And in wrestling, it's like called you using your hips. And like some people just have, it's like, you either have it or you don't have it. And some guys have these like heavy hips, and Casey's are like cinder blocks. And I remember being like, okay, I'm the best college wrestler. I'm most dominant. Okay, Casey, you want to go with me today? Yeah. Okay. Shoot a single leg. And it was just like, I seriously thought that if he used all his strength, he would break my shoulders off. And so, I mean, basically in a little thing, it's like from a mental toughness standpoint, if you let somebody just run behind you. So it's like in wrestling, if you take a bad shot and you're in what's called a front headlock. And this, I think that one of the biggest demonstrations of mental toughness is, okay, yeah, there's skill involved for this guy to get a go behind but for you underneath, to not let this guy get this go behind is so important. And, for him, it was like, I would get there, he'd, pull me in a bad shot, he'd run behind me. And he'd be like, you can't let me run behind you. You got to fight more. What I mean? As a wrestler, like, if someone tells you to fight more, it's like the most insulting thing ever. You're like, well, I'm trying to fight, And I think over time that has resonated to me so much. And now that I'm a coach, that's my biggest thing that I emphasize with my kids is fight. I'm like, if you guys are willing to fight in these positions, specifically in a go behind, that's like my number one position for them, then I can teach you to be a great wrestler. I can teach you all the techniques in the world. I'll give you all the things, but your number one test of mental toughness is if you're in a front headlock, nobody goes behind you. And if someone does go behind you, you're making them fight every second for that takedown, And I think, and I've looked in my career and some of my biggest matches that I've won that have been tough have been not refusing to give up the go behind and either not letting the guy score or scoring from that position. And that's just like, for me, that's where Casey, I think, made the biggest impact on me. And once you truly can fight, and when I say fight, it's not about fist fighting. It's like, I'm going to dig down. This is hard. I'm tired. I got a pit in my stomach, but I've taken a bad shot. He's running behind me. He's gotten me beat, but I'm going to fight. And I'm not letting this guy get this takedown here, and I'm going to extend this position. And I think when I truly bought into that philosophy that he kind of he's been instilling in me for 6-7 years, that's when I truly was able to become the best in the world. And I think was such a huge impact.
Yeah, you mentioned the fighting, the digging down deep. It's almost making my engine start to rev here, just thinking about some of those moments, having to dig deep throughout sports. Do you have any stories or memories, and I'm hoping you can just relive, the most grueling practice or workout you've ever had?
Oh, boy. I mean, I've been in high school, we had some tough ones. My coach was just, we were overworked constantly. We were always ran to the ground, and we had a great high school program, but the philosophy was cut a lot of weight, be in great shape, and that was kind of the main two things, and technique kind of came second. All we did was wrestle live. And I remember, we had some practices. I can't even, they were so kind of repetitive that it was the same always, but they were always hard. There were times we wrestled hours of live wrestling, hours, of new partner, whatever it was. So I don't really specifically remember one then. Now in my training, I train with the training lab to strengthen. Sam Calavita is my strength and conditioning coach out of California, and he is the work. Every single Tuesday that I have with him it's like it trumps the one before. It's so hard, and so that plays a huge thing. I can't tell you a specific one per se that's really difficult, because it's like every time I leave, I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted. So it's hard for me to really say like what practice has been the absolute toughest for me. I would say for me, because of the way that I wrestle, I kind of wear people down. So I'd say that the practices for me that have been the toughest is when someone rotates in on me. So it's me and like 3 or 4 other people. And every, 2 minutes you switch to a new partner, or a new partner's coming in on you, because I never really get a chance to where I thrive is not the first 2 minutes. It's like the last 4 minutes. So, I never really get a chance to like really truly wear. And I wrestle such a high pace that I'm going to that first partner, when I'm done and they switch, they're dead. They're going to probably barely survive the next partner. Well, whoever I switched to, they weren't really wrestling that hard, and I've already gone really tough, but I'm to that point where I'm about to break my opponent, but now I have a new partner. So whenever those practices are, those are the ones that are the toughest for me.
Can you talk about your style? I would love to know, even just mentally, how you handle being down early in matches and knowing you're going to come on late.
I just think I don't think of it as like, oh, I'm losing. In the matches that, the 3 probably biggest matches that I've had over the last, 3 or 4 years, 2 were the same guy. Hassan Yazdani from Iran, the guy I mentioned, the returning world Olympic champion. In 2017, I wrestled him. Well, I wrestled in the World Cup, and I hadn't really had that much success internationally yet. I had just went up a weight class. I had really kind of recommitted and refocused to all those kind of things that I've talked about. I started to understand in that maturity. I've been competing throughout the year. In the World Cup, the pool that we were in, we had Azerbaijan, Russia, Georgia in our pool, which are, those are some of the top, and the United States. So those are come out the wrestling countries. Those are pretty much 4 perennially the best wrestling countries in the world. And in the finals, we would have Iran. Iran was on the other side of the bracket. So, and the guys that I knew I would wrestle in that tournament was a junior world champion from Russia, a world and Olympic bronze medalist from Georgia, and a world and Olympic champion from Azerbaijan. And then Iran was the returning world and Olympic champion from Iran. So I knew at that point I was on minimum wrestle. If our team won, I was on 2 Olympic champions, countless world champions, world medalists, all the best guys in the world. And I hadn't really beaten anyone to that ability yet. So I went to that tournament, and I was losing in 3 of those 4 matches. I was losing. And I remember the first match I was wrestling in Georgia, and I was losing until about 45 seconds left. And I double legged this guy to his back and ended up going up and winning that first match. But it was just like he was exhausted. He couldn't even come back to the center and stand up. Next match, I wrestled a guy from Russia. Right off the bat, he floored me. I was down 4-0. And in wrestling, like a feet to back 4-pointer, like the probability of someone getting a 4 and winning is probably like almost 90%, because it's to beat that, you basically have to score 3 times to overcome that scoring deficit. So I'm down 4-0 in the first 20 seconds. Well, by the end of the first period, this guy is so tired he can't even stand up. I ended up tech following him like shortly in the second period. He was like laying on the mat. This guy was a junior world champ. Then the next match, I had the world Olympic champion from Azerbaijan, who actually, you know, when he he has been unbelievable. I mean, he's won, I don't know how many medals he's won, but I just kind of overwhelmed that guy right from the get-go. I tech followed him 12-2. So then I'm like, wow, I have all this momentum going. These guys can't wrestle with my pace. Everything's kind of clicked. But now I have Yazdani, he is probably he and I wrestle the 2 hardest, fastest paces. We just exhaust our opponents, and we wrestle so similar in the way that we wrestle. And I'm getting like just dominated. It's in Iran. This arena is insane, crazy. Like, it's like you're just exhausted by the atmosphere. It's like, it feels like it's so heavy on you. And I'm getting dominated, not really on the scoreboard, but the mat. I was down 3-0 on 3 push-outs. And on 2 of the push-outs, they called me for fleeing the hold. So on a 3rd caution, you're out of the match. So I had 2 cautions, down 3-0, and he's just dominating me. So it's like, basically, if I get pushed out of bounds again, or if I even take like a step backwards in the next 4 minutes of this match, I'm going to lose by disqualification. And I got a takedown with 1 second left in the first period. So it's like, I go into break 3-2. I kind of been dominated, but now I'm only 1 score away from being in the match. And I remember coming back out of the break, and he's so used to just dominating people, and everyone else can't even function with him. And now I've got him to the point where he can't function. And I remember there was a really key moment where we're going back and forth, and with his go behind position, and he was getting a go behind, and I held a quad pod. So if a guy's going to go behind and you touch a forehead, an elbow, or a knee, you give up a takedown. And I held it. So I'm like on both my hands and both my feet, and I give up only a push out. So it's like the momentum of him thinking he's going to get a takedown, but now he did all that work and only got 1 push out. We come back in the middle. I get the next takedown. So now it's 4-4. And I remember looking over being like, wow, I'm winning on criteria. I have 2 takedowns. He has 4 push-outs. And I got the next score, the next takedown. Now I'm up 6-4. And I remember thinking in my head, like, this guy is going to have to take me down twice to beat me. That's not happening. He takes a shot. I get a reattack. I take it down his back and pin him in Iran. And it was like, that was really the first time that I broke through that mental toughness, where it was a match that I wasn't supposed to win, that I won, and the way that I won. And that really kind of springboarded me to where I am now.
You've got a pretty remarkable memory for reliving your matches.
It's just, I feel like it's those ones because they're vivid to me, you know, and I think in the impact that they've had, not all of them are like that, you know, but those ones that have, I think, helped me mentally get to where I am now have definitely have more of a lasting impact.
You've got so many moments throughout your career that someone would work their entire life to accomplish that. State championships, national championships, world championship. What do you deem as the most satisfying?
World championship, for sure. Because I think my expectation and everyone's expectation was I was going to win state championships. I was going to win national championships. It was a matter of kind of like, my expectation was win 4 state championships, 4 national championships, you know, and I really, truly 100% believed I was going to do that. You know, I lost 3 times in college. 2 of them were in the finals. So I think the next thing I was kind of thinking of was, I remember my first national championship, I was just mostly relieved more than anything else. You know, I kind of like achieved that. And then it was kind of looking forward, but I think world and Olympic titles are, you're truly the absolute best in the world. And it's such a hard thing. And I think I realized it when I got out of college, how hard that truly was. Cause I wasn't close. I went from that guy that I was to not even placing in tournaments, a lot of tournaments. The only tournaments I was really placing and winning were the ones that were perceived not to be very tough, you know, and I was just so far behind the best guys in the world at the time. So I think once you're the best in the world, you are, you know, no one can take that from you ever the rest of your life. And I think it's a hard thing to accomplish. So that to me is the most exciting, you know. Unfortunately, you know, due to injury last year, I felt like after 2018, I was in this position where I was, I still am, but, to be able to miss basically now 2 years, 2019, I missed to an injury, 2020, we missed to the coronavirus. It's really frustrating to be, I believe, when I step on the mat, I really believe a lot in my abilities. So this is definitely the toughest time, winning in 2018 and now basically being 2 years removed from competition, but but that's definitely my most valued.
Can you dig deeper on your self-belief?
Can I?
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that. Even when you step onto a mat, is there a moment where you have doubt?
No, there isn't. Because of the work that I put in outside of the room. I just know that, and everyone says they work hard, and everyone does. And in high school, everyone works hard. In college, people work hard, and I worked hard. But what I did then and what I do now, I'm in comparison. I always deem myself the hardest worker my whole life, but what the commitment level that I have to being the best now is not even in comparison to then. Just with my diet, my training, my recovery, the way that I wrestle and practice, like the way I wrestle in competition, people just aren't willing to do that because it's really hard. It's really fatiguing. And you have to be willing to take risks. And that's just that people aren't willing to take those. And I'm willing to take more. My philosophy is, I'm going to take 10 shots and score 5. I'm not going to ever take 2 and score 1. And I might take 10, get scored on 3 times, but I still believe I can score 5. And I think that gives me a lot of self-belief. And I go out there, and if I get beat in my matches, it's because the guy beat me. I don't, a lot of times earlier in my career, I lose because I just didn't really give everything I had, very few times ever in my life that I get beat, whereas I gave everything and I lost. Most of the time it was, I held it back. I didn't wrestle the way that I wrestled. I've truly been able to now wrestle and give everything that I have. So if someone beats me, they beat me, and they can be the best in the world at that point in time. And that's not really, I don't think that's arrogance. I don't believe that's just, and that's not really in confidence. That's just belief in the facts of what I'm willing to do over 6 minutes and the preparation that I put into it.
Speaking about your preparation, I would love for you just to dive into what that preparation actually looks like, even in terms of how are you structuring your day right now? How much are you putting into training? And then I'm even hoping we can dive a little bit deeper into diet.
I mean, right now it's tough, right? I mean, we're all stuck in our houses, so it's making the most of this time, and I've been able to make a gym in my garage. I communicate frequently with Coach Cal in California, and my workouts are really difficult. In the way that he's challenged me, we're making progress in ways that we couldn't make if I was competing. Wrestling wise, I'm not wrestling right now just because no one is, right. I mean, I'm just focused on stance of motion and things that I can control. And doing that, really focus on my visualization. And I know that when I get back to the room, within 2 weeks I'll be back ready to go because of just the discipline that I have and everything else in my life. But it's a challenging time. On a normal day, my schedule is very routine and structured. It's really, for me, it's Saturday through Friday or whatever, however you want to do that. Sundays are my off day. But I'm throughout the week, it's pretty regimented with, 9 a.m., working out of some capacity, coming back at 1:30, practicing, then balancing, my life with my wrestling club at night at 7:00. So it's a pretty routine schedule right now. I like routine. I like being busy. This is tough for me to be able to have sit around and have so much lapse in time, but just like everyone trying to make the most of it.
What about just leading up to Tokyo here now, going to be in July of 2021? How strict is your diet, and what is that diet going to look like?
Well, I mean, I think can't give away my secrets, in terms of, the way I live. But I just think it's about living a clean lifestyle, and I think it's clean and just the things that you're putting in your body, looking at the ingredients and labels. For me, it's a diet that's composed of, organic or sustainably sourced as much as possible, and I know it's for me, I look at it as an investment into my health. It's like if you have a Ferrari, you're not going to put cheap gas into it. And I think that's just the way that I look at it. So, it's I eat a lot. I eat, 4,000 to 6,000 calories a day, depending on where I am. And so it's constantly eating, sometimes big meals, sometimes small meals, and mixing that stuff up over time. Your body, is amazing how it adapts. So, you constantly kind of keep it guessing and keep it on its toes, and I try not to ever fall into too much of a routine, but I rely heavily on Coach Cal, and his advice and his structure, and I'm very coachable in what he wants me to do. So it's, but yeah, I mean, you're talking about, it's 1 year to achieve something that I've been working for 29 years for. So trying to do the most that I possibly can to, keep the engine running.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be rooting for you at the Olympics coming up here. We're about to wrap up. Just a few more quick ones I would love to know. What have you found about world champions or national champions that's just different, that people from the outside wouldn't understand unless you're spending time, you're really understanding how that engine works? What makes that engine run?
I think it's just it's like the unique competitiveness. Guys that have, there's sometimes guys that win national titles that aren't the best guys in the bracket, right? But they're the best on that day or over the last 3 days. And it's because of the way that they can compete, and different guys have different ways to win. Some guys, it's so much strategy, some guys it's, it's just being on at the right time, and I think some guys are just the best guys in the bracket, right? There's definitely a variation there, but I think, to win a tournament of that caliber, national, it's the best guys in the country, world champions, best guys in the world. You got to compete and want to win more than anything. You got to be willing to really do what it takes in those matches you're going to overcome adversity at some point in time. And how do you handle that when you address it?
If you could wrestle any pro athlete or celebrity, who would it be?
Yeah. The Rock Johnson.
Yeah.
DeLaney. I love The Rock. I think he's the man. So, I mean, I think, I don't follow a lot of celebrities and stuff on social media, but he's someone that I follow. And every time he posts, I'm like reading about it. I think just the way that he balances everything he does is pretty special. So he's definitely someone I'd want to wrestle and spend some time with.
Yeah, I'm a big fan as well. Here we go. Final one. When it's all said and done, David Taylor will be known for.
I just think, being someone that's truly 100% bought in to perfecting their craft and trying to use the tools that I've been given to truly be the absolute best that I can be.
I love it. I love it. Where else can the listeners stay connected with you? I know we're going to have everything linked up in the show notes, but anywhere you want them to be directed right now?
Yeah, I think, my Instagram, my Twitter is the same, magicman_PSU. And I try and, document my story of wrestling, owning a wrestling club. My wife and I own a juice business, now being a dad of 3 cats, being a dad to London, our newborn baby. So, I think, that's really probably the best way someone can follow me.
Yeah. Congratulations on the newborn. And David, thanks again for joining us on What Got You There.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
You guys made it to the end of another episode of What Got You There. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really do appreciate you taking the time to listen all the way through. If you found value in this, the best way you can support the show is giving us a review, rating it, sharing it with your friends, and also sharing on social. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Looking forward to you guys listening to another episode.